The ordinary meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. First, any apologies? I have an apology from Councillor Fulton. I think everyone else is here. So I'll move that apologies for Councillor Fulton be received. Seconded, Councillor Davey. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Confirmation order of the business is, as per the agenda, we will deal with the hearing of submissions to the resource consent activity and also fees and charges, and then we'll move on to the ordinary meeting as per the agenda. Just remind anyone that has any members have any interest they need to declare, you can do that now or at the appropriate time. Okay, we'll begin with the hearing of submissions. First we have Mr. Brad Cadwallader from Cadwallader Tree Consultancy. Good morning. Take it that your submission has been read, so this is an opportunity for you to expand, illustrate, highlight any particular points you want, and we've got 10 minutes.
Firstly, I just appreciate the opportunity to make this submission. This has come about from a recent experience I've had with making an application on behalf of a tree owner that had a tree that was causing considerable damage to her home, and it seemed, after consulting with council about whether the tree should, after consulting with council, there was agreement that really it was an untenable situation. The tree had to go, and then obviously there needed to be a consent applied for, and it resulted in a $700 charge to then, I guess, do the paperwork to have the tree, allow the tree to then be subsequently removed. So that was my first submission, and I feel as though when a council agree that a tree should be removed, that it is causing damage to a dwelling that there's not where there's no practical remedy, that perhaps there should be no fee involved. My second submission, back to the first one, in terms of the relief sought, I do think that there needs to be some change to the requirement of a qualified arborist to write reports with respect to trees that are listed on the resource management plan. I think that's very vague, and that it would be better to ensure that suitably qualified and experienced arborists undertake that role. The second submission was just something that I guess over the years I've been involved with prescribing works for heritage trees, and it seemed a bit odd that for most of the work that heritage trees need, like crown reductions, that would cost $1,300 to apply for consent for works that trees need, when much of the permitted activities, thinning, crown lifting, can actually be quite injurious to heritage trees, and this is work that's actually permitted. And given that council are generally the party that are doing most of the pruning works, all of the heritage trees are maintained by Nelson City Council, that you're paying yourself to agree that certain works need to be done to trees, and you're having to apply to yourself when the work is being prescribed by qualified arborists, when most of that work would probably be less than $1,300 worth of pruning work. In Tasman, if the work's agreed to by council and is recommended by their consulting arborist, then the work is carried out. There's no application. It's work that's in the best interest of the tree. That summarises my submission. Thank you.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Copeland?
Thanks very much for taking the time. So in Tasman, is it they don't have any process at all, any consent process for the pruning of trees? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, the council provide advice, free advice to tree owners. If the advice of that arborist is that the tree is pruned, then the council allows that work to proceed. So it would only be if council disagreed that they would then require a consent.
Okay, a subsequent question through the chair, if I may. So is there a reporting structure? The qualified arborist creates a report of any kind, or is this just a verbal okay?
Oh, there's a report and a memo and an inspection.
And the cost of that falls to?
Council provided.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Through an independent arborist.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Laurie, then Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Brad. Are there a lot of people out there calling themselves qualified arborists who don't know a lot about trees?
Well, you can become a qualified arborist, get a certificate over 2 or 3 months, compared to a qualified arborist that might have 30 years experience like myself. And most of the qualifications that entry level qualifications that you would get as an arborist would be to carry out the work. So to become a sort of a consultant arborist, so it's not really requiring a consultant arborist to pass these determinations. It would be like an accountant. You get a degree in accountancy, but then you've got to do 3 levels, 3 years, get 3 years experience before you become a chartered accountant. There's no such thing in New Zealand, so you can have a certificate in arboriculture from a polytechnic and you would be qualified. So it's a very loose expression. If our view were to talk about levels of qualification, a diploma is a level 6, a level 5, there are level 4 and level 5 qualifications that could be used to describe certain levels of expertise.
Through the chair, so do you think that's the level at which we should say that's the threshold, you need to be at that level before you can do this work?
Well, I think that's something for council to consider. You know, what level of qualification would you consider an arborist to have the expertise to make judgments on our most important trees in the district? If it's just basic pruning of some of the street trees up the main street, I think most arborists would be okay with that, but with our heritage trees, there are very complex issues involved, and I think council should be considering more highly qualified and experienced arborists be used in those.
One more through the chair, if that's okay. So what's best practice? What is Wellington, Christchurch, Auckland? What do they do? Do you know?
Well, there's currently to carry out the work, most councils agree that the work should be supervised. There should be a foreman on site, the minimum of a level 4 qualification. So there's a foreman and there are 2 other staff on site, and that's doing the work. I think there is agreement, and the New Zealand Arboricultural Association just made a submission to Christchurch replacement district plan, recommending that a level 5 arborist be one would have the suitable qualifications to prescribe works to heritage trees.
Question, if that's okay. Do we have plenty of those people, Nelson?
I would say there would be 3 or 4 or 5 maybe. Yeah.
Thank you. My question was along the same lines. You've mentioned levels of competency. Is there a national body, apart from the New Zealand Arboriculturist Association that you mentioned, is there a national body that actually sets those levels?
The New Zealand Qualifications Authority control the national qualifications for arboriculture, and so they prescribe the competencies for level 4, level 5, level 6.
Mm-hmm. And they carry out the testing, do they?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next we have David Marsh. Mr. Marsh.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I'd like to start off by, first of all, looking at the actual Fencing and Swimming Pool Act 1987, and in the draft fees and charges where you state that Nelson County Council has an obligation under that act to actually monitor, and you use the word monitor in your document, that the swimming pools are still complying with the fencing requirement even after they've been issued a code of compliance. I'd like to point out that I cannot find in the 1987 Act any specific instruction which says that you shall monitor. It says that you shall check, and there is a major difference between the words, if you look at the definitions of monitor, and it's not the same as re-inspecting, which is what you're actually planning to do. There's a substantial difference, and I believe that you're going too far with what you're proposing to do. In connection directly with my submission to you, in my own case, I have a spa pool, which is actually a swimming pool because it's sunk 600 millimeters into the deck to make it easy to get in and out. So technically it becomes a swimming pool. So I have a 1.9 meter by 1.9 swimming pool, which is 350 millimeters deep. I comply with the Fencing Act because I've already been inspected. I have a permanent fence and permanent gates around the area. They are substantial Quila-built specialist gating, special gate fencing. They have proper Quila gates. They have the proper locks. The doors, the sliding out doors to the patio, to the area, have additional locks on them as instructed by the inspector, and all the windows have safety checks on them. All these are permanent features. I cannot see, therefore, why the council wishes to re-inspect such places when there are permanent safety precautions in place. And in my case, there is additional precautions already in place. We have a locked swimming pool cover on top of it, and on top of this spa pool sits 2 very large, heavy Quila tables which are locked in position when the pools are not being used. So I would like to suggest to the council that it re-examine this proposal on the basis that if they are granted a code of compliance certificate, if that fencing is of a permanent nature, it should not be subject to re-inspection. If you wish to, as the dictionary says, keep an eye on, then surely a simple 3-year submission to that person asking them if they've made any changes to that particular fencing or that any other changes which need to be considered should be sufficient for you to ensure that it's still being done. I would also like you to think about this in relation to a general code of compliance issued for a balustrade. Do you intend to go back and re-inspect every balustrade every 3 years once you've issued a code of compliance for it? That would make nonsense, as would making a code of compliance check on every house that's got a code of compliance as well. I believe you're going too far with this. You should simply put in a monitoring system, which is when they have been inspected and given a code of compliance, you should be requesting from the owner once every 3 years confirmation from them in writing that they have made no substantive alterations or amendments and that all the fencing is functioning properly. That, I believe, would constitute effective monitoring, as you're expected to do according to the paragraph in the Act, and not as you're planning to do. Thank you very much.
Your point has been well articulated and I think clearly understood by the committee, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much for giving me the time and the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I felt I wanted to do so because there were several points which I wanted to make which were not necessarily best explained in writing but in person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes the hearing of submissions. We'll move on to the ordinary meeting of the Plenary Committee, and it was a bit of an oversight, but welcome to Samuel and Sam, two Sams, as our youth councillors. Welcome. So moving on to the committee, ordinary meeting rather. Again, apologies from Councillor Fulton. Confirmation of all the business as per the agenda. Interests as bring up as required at the appropriate period of time. I don't think I've had no notice for anyone for public forum, so we'll move on to the confirmation of the minutes. Confirmation of minutes. It's pages 5, 6, 7 and 8, 9, 10 and 11. Someone to move that you're incorrect? Councillor Laurie?
The motion around the warrants of fitness was moved by Councillor Barker, but his vote is recorded against it. Did he move it? Did you?
I moved the original motion, which was what the staff had recommended. It was seconded by Mrs. Payne. I think from memory, Councillor Laurie moved the amendments. The minutes do not display the recommendation that staff made at the beginning, but the commentary that, if you read it, in my view, covers the discussion that took place, vague as it is, in terms of what the staff are expected to do from that resolution. But no, I did not move the final resolution, and that's why I voted against it.
Just trying to think of my notes. So the mover, so you didn't move, Councillor Barker, you didn't move that.
No, I believe it's Councillor Laurie.
I can advise understanding what is it's the
You see,
original.
it became the substantive motion.
Just the advice from the officers is the original mover and second of the motion is recorded in the minutes, and that becomes the substantive motion.
Anyway, my position against it remains because it's vague, and it, although there is something in the status report as to what staff are doing about the resolution that became the final substantive motion, which I did not agree with and did not vote for.
That's fine, Councillor Barker. It was moved, it was seconded.
I don't mind if the minutes display it this way. The important point for me is that I voted against it, and my vote against it is recorded.
I thought that might have been the explanation, but I just wanted to check. I just picked it up. It seemed a little strange.
after the amendments, not what was the original motion. Yes, but the substantive motion is different to the original motion, Mr. Chairman.
Move it's true. Move the meeting is true and correct record by Councillor Lloyd. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ward. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Status report. Move on to the status report. Land Development Manual is a brief reference in the quarterly report and also my chairperson's report. Nelson Plan update and the warrant of fitness in the minutes. So I'll move that the Councillor Davey.
The Nelson Plan update, it's got the word complete here. Got a further update coming, so this item is still ongoing.
Good point. You change that to ongoing. You happy to move with that amendment there, Councillor Davey?
Happy to move that, yes.
It's only 3 items. Your Worship?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that there is anything wrong with page 13. I'm just reading what the officers have reported. I may be reading this incorrectly, but I think that it's saying it's complete because we're referring to the resolution, which are the dates August 15 and December 15, both of which have passed, which means it's complete. So I think that it is an accurate reflection of the status in relation to those resolutions.
Mr. Chair, you don't want to table argument, but the
No.
Nelson Plan hasn't gone out yet, so it can't be complete.
I take the point that the Mayor has made is that be received, the further update rating to Nelson Plan is provided in December 2015. We've had an update in 2015. There is ongoing work, but the status report says that an update would be required in December 2015.
My argument then, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, is that it's removed from the status report and that the Nelson Plan is complete. I can't agree with that. Just my thoughts.
Yeah.
I'll move that Mr. Chair, that the status report's received as it is.
As is. Moved. The seconder, Councillor Ward. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Move on to the quarterly report, or chairperson's report rather. A relatively short one, just that Councillor Ward and I attended the most recent steering group meeting, the Land Development Manual, very, very fruitful meeting. The timelines as indicated is that we'll be going out, draft has just been checked for legal advice or legal advisors to make sure it's current, and a bit of editing. It'll go out for consultation with the stakeholders groups. There'll be a stakeholder workshop and on the 6th of July. So pretty much back on schedule. So I'll move that the report be received and the contents noted. Seconded Mrs. Payne. Any discussion? Yeah, Councillor Ward.
It's been an interesting experience, and I actually enjoy working with our neighbours across the boundary on this one. And I asked the question the other day: will we both come out of it as better off than we went into this process? And the answer is yes. We've learned from each other. The final presentation I found particularly interesting. This is on the low impact drainage measures. Just really, really, really interesting stuff. And in going through the process, the importance of the various aspects of council's operations working together is absolutely vital. There's nothing that doesn't impact, that we do in one department, that doesn't impact on another department. And so it has been an interesting experience. Of course, we have an inspection tomorrow to go out and see some of the interesting things that are happening already. We're not starting from scratch. There are lots of things we do similarly, and there will be some that we will agree to disagree on, but not terribly many.
There is the opportunity for elected members to join the tour of low impact drainage systems tomorrow afternoon I'll be going. I think Councillor Ward, you'll be joining us.
I wouldn't have thought that this would be one of those things that I could get excited by, but I think I do. In fact, I know I do. Each time I go to these meetings, I find things happening and said that I think actually these are important. They're not just important because they let us do the things better in respect of having engineering standards that meet the basics. They're actually standards that enable us to do the job of being a city councillor and providing for the city in a way that meets all of our goals, and I think that's the important bit of it.
And it became particularly apparent when we were talking about freshwater quality. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Mr Brown, building unit fees and charges. Welcome.
Good morning all.
Take it the report's been read. Anything you wish to highlight or bring to our...
Through you, Mr Chair, I will just highlight the sort of key change, just for clarity. It comes in the area of the commercial building consents, and it comes from a review that we have undertaken of the consents that we've undertaken over the last sort of 18 months. And we found that because of the variety and the complexity of the commercial building consents we get in, to have a fixed fee wasn't working. So we're proposing to move to a deposit with a time charge based on time used, which is the fairest way for these consents. The residential will stay the same as that is working, and certainly the feedback from the public and the users of the service is that the cost certainty around the residentials is a great benefit for them. So that's probably the two key areas I'd like to just highlight. Thank you.
Any questions?
I take it the feedback from the commercial applicants was that they didn't consider it fair either.
Through you, Mr Chair, there hadn't been any clear sort of key feedbacks from the commercials, but when we reviewed the findings of how they were working, it was found that we didn't feel it was a fair way of applying, because you can have quite a variety of different works coming in, and to assess a fixed fee against it doesn't always meet the level of work required for those works.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm not a member of this committee, but something I'd like to pick up on page 18, and that's regarding service for commercial marquees and fees. I'm having a little bit of difficulty trying to see the justification from a standard fee of $300 for 20 working days prior to 3 times that amount at $900 for 5 days less. Could you just add a bit more meat to this reason, please?
Certainly, through the Chair. We've had occasions where marquees have come in at a very, very late stage in the piece, and what that actually impacts on the team, certainly under 5 days, is a lot of extra working, moving consents around, getting people involved, getting inspectors to go and inspect. And really, we found that we did historically do one, and it was around that sort of $700, $900 mark that we ended up in time, with all the backwards and forwards, toing and froing, to try and make sure that that marquee was actually delivered and compliant and reached co-compliance for that event. So that's one of the reasons this is a fee reflective of the sort of time it will take to deal with the late applications for these.
Through you, if I may, Mr Chair, but that seems an exorbitant increase. I mean, I can understand the additional effort that might have to go in there to fast track the consent, and the reasons can be wide and varied for that. Mm-hmm. But 3 times as much?
And through you, Mr Chair, I mean,
through you, Mr Chair, the key thing to note is that if somebody gets the building consent in on time, so prior to the 20 working days, then the same fee applies. This is only going to apply to those that put in the consent application and expect a service within 5 working days. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So if it's the norm and they do what's expected, then there is no change in the fee. This is a premium service where if somebody comes in and wants something issued within 5 working days, there is an additional fee attached to that.
Not like a passport.
But if I can just follow that up then, what if most of the circumstances resulting from the late application aren't always those of the applicants? Say for an emergency situation or similar, or suddenly something's landed on them that they have to get a marquee up. What do you do in those cases?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the examples where this has arisen in the last sort of few months, they have known that they have required to go through a process, but they've left it until the last minute. So it's not been an unknown. It's been they've understood what was required. It just hasn't happened. So we will be putting some clear messaging out to say the expectation is if you get it in within the 20 working days, it's all the same. However, if for whatever reason you find that you can't do that, then we do offer this service.
Councillor Wood, another question? Councillor Copeland.
That was going to be my question as well, is the majority of these late applicants, are they aware that they need a building consent? Or are do the majority of marquee erectors know that they need a building consent? They do.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is known.
Councillor Ward.
Presumably these are owned by companies which actually make them available to activities, so that they would know.
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. The providers of marquees are fully aware of the requirements around building consents for marquees. The situation that you have is, though, it is the owner's responsibility, or the landowner, to actually obtain the building consent, and it may be that they do it through another agent. However, it is known about by the providers, and they should be advising the owners, and we will do some messaging around that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm presuming from the recommendation from the Chief Executive or who wrote this report that staff have the delegated authority to set these fees. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Right. So my question arising from that is, how can we justify a minimum of 25% increase in fees for space heaters? It seems exorbitant in the scheme of things and the levels of charges that we have at the moment. I can only assume with this recommendation of a 25%, or this statement that fees have been increased by staff by 25% minimum for space heaters, that we weren't charging enough before and we were losing money. Why is this increase so big?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'd worked out the amount of time taken to process these types of consents, and that is what's reflected in the charge. So our hourly rate is $125 per hour. Now, these current fees have not been adjusted for up until 3 years before. Prior fees obviously have set that level, so we are just now bringing it in line with what our current charging regime is.
So my assumption is correct. We've been running at a loss up until now, have we?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, there will be discussions around not necessarily a loss, but there's certainly obviously a need to look at these fees and decide when we want to upgrade them to recover the cost.
No further questions.
Just a point of clarification, your hourly rate for commercial charge, is that $125 an hour?
Through you, Mr. Chair, correct.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Have a recommendation that the building charges fees and charges in 1 July 2016 as attachment be received and noted. That's the recommendation. So has someone prepared to move?
Sorry, I just have a third question if I may. Is that okay, Mr. Chair?
One question for clarification.
Just around the PIM review of charge. So could you just explain under the current fee, new fixed fee, and the change with reason? Could you just explain the?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the situation we found with the PIM application is you can get PIMs at certain times. You can get a PIM only, or you can get a PIM with a building consent. Now, trying to delineate the amount of time taken through that process when the time's being recorded is quite challenging around the PIM with a building consent. So we wanted to make it a standard fixed fee for a PIM, and we did note there were some differences between the information provided. So now it's a standardised PIM form that we send out, and the information is all the same throughout. But that's why the fixed charge is as such. So a PIM at the time of building consent is the same price as a PIM if you get it separately, because you get the same information.
Was it possible that people had a very brief PIM and for a fixed fee of $75? Was it possible under the old fee system?
Through you, Mr. Chair, from the research I've done, no, they wouldn't get one for $75.
Was there an average of what?
It was through you, Mr. Chair, the average was around that sort of the figure that we're dealing with. It's around sort of $200, $280 a time taken to do it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Right, it's been moved. That's the recommendation. I'm prepared to move.
I'd like to speak to us.
Yeah.
I'm not moving it.
No, I'm prepared to move. We can. Someone to second?
I will second it.
Second. All right. Open for debate.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I'm concerned at this level of increase that's going to be hitting people in this day and age where the CPI and the rate of inflation are so low. This is going to have a real effect on people who are trying to keep warm and healthy when they're getting the opportunity to have their own home heating. This increase in charge is unreasonable, and we're trying to keep our rates and charges as low as possible to reflect the difficulty that people on low and fixed incomes have, and to put an increase like this in is not giving a very good message, and I don't like it. So I can't do anything about it because the council has delegated to staff the ability to put this fee up, but I'm not happy about it.
I'm uncomfortable with this level of increase, but I'm aware that, of how much I pay when I go to my dentist. I'm aware of the cost of professional services, and I'm aware of our responsibilities to the community to make sure that when things are done here, they're done well, they're done safely, that there aren't any unforeseen consequences down track. Now, if in the past, and our level of recovery isn't 100%, they recognise that there's a community benefit and the ratepayer pays for that. But the majority of the benefit will go to the applicant. So even if they could increase a great deal more before it would get to the full cost of doing this work, I believe. It is what it costs for us to do the job that we are expected to do. We've had the leaky house thing in the past, and it's come back to hit us. Anytime anything goes wrong in this, the first thing people ask is, what has the council done about it? And so if this is what it takes, but I have to concede that I am uncomfortable. These are quite large numbers, and they're quite round numbers. I'm always uncomfortable with round numbers. 25% is a very round number, but I don't, my level of expertise isn't in this area, and I have to look at this and say, well, this is the advice I'm given, compared with, as I say, what I pay my dentist. It seems very modest.
Thank you. I'm not supporting the recommendation. I find that trying to catch up in 1 year for the last 3 years and thereby increasing the charges so much is completely out of order as far as I'm concerned. The $900 fee for a marquee what you call a premium service. There are times when people have to hire a marquee at short notice because they have to have somewhere for a funeral to occur. What are we doing with that? Charging them $900? Sorry, but I find that unacceptable. It's an emergency situation, and surely a fee of even the $450 for quick service is more realistic, but $900 is totally unrealistic. All of a sudden, we're going for wanting people to have solar water heating because it's sustainable. And here we are. We're now no charge at the moment. We're putting it up to $200 just overnight. Why can't these things be bought in staggered? Why can't we bring them in at a incremental rate rather than all of a sudden after 3 years, gee, we better change our fee structure because we've been laxed for the last 3 years? I'm sorry, but I can't agree with this. And maybe the word lax is wrong, but why after 3 years have we not looked at this to make these changes incrementally? I support Councillor Barker totally that a 25% increase in many of these fees, and when you go through the general information, the schedule, I can't accept that. Thank you.
I'd like to see it brought in more incrementally as well. I think it would be more appropriate. Some of these I do feel uncomfortable with. I do understand that we do need to recover the funds, otherwise it is on the general ratepayer, but some of the increases are quite large in a short period of time, and it just doesn't feel that comfortable really with me.
The recommendation is that the fees and its attachment be received and noted. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Ask for a show of hands. Division's been called.
That's okay. So all we can do is receive and note this.
Yeah.
We can't actually influence the fees ourselves because
It's in the delegations.
Yeah. So I just so I can understand how this works. Voting against this does what?
We don't receive the report.
Okay.
In explanation, I believe that the committee does have the power to refer the matter back to staff to reconsider.
That's not the motion. The motion is that the report be received and noted. It's been moved and seconded, and that's what we're voting on.
Well,
Division's been called.
To allow it to proceed, I'll move an amendment. It hasn't been put yet. I'll move an amendment.
I've given notice that it's been put. It's too late. Division's been called.
Councillor Barker.
No.
Councillor Copeland. Councillor Davey. No. Councillor Laurie.
No.
Councillor Girk.
Aye.
Councillor Ward. And Glenys Payne.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, like some of these things in the report, I have a conflict of interest, so I'm unclear about where I go from here.
We've declared a conflict, so abstain. The motion is lost, 4 votes to 2, with 1 abstention. So the report is not received. Moving on to the quarterly report, Miss Bishop. Take it, report's been read. Is there any matters that you wish to add or highlight?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of updates, and you probably have heard some of them through the media, but I just thought I'd raise them because it's 3 months till the next one. And the media has reported that the Waimarama Sanctuary Trust application for an aerial drop of pest control bait has been approved. The appeal closes 3rd of June, I understand. So, yeah, we'll just await that appeal close-off date. There was a dog attack that occurred on Waimea Road. Prosecution has commenced for that. with a number of charges laid against the owner. And the councillors may not be aware, but some good news for our monitoring officers who undertake permitted activity monitoring throughout the year. One project which they are involved with at the moment is storm water discharge and also hazardous substance storage. So they commenced a program visiting all the industrial businesses surrounding Saltwater Creek. So this dovetails into the environmental programs work to improve water quality in that area. And they've found general compliance with our permitted standards in terms of hazardous substance storage and stormwater discharges, but they have reminded many businesses to undertake more regular cleaning and cleaning and maintenance of their stormwater systems, their sumps, etc. So even that will probably improve the water discharge quite substantially. So they're just about finished in the Saltwater Creek area, and then they'll next head over to Te Hunanui industrial area. So do you have anything to add?
No, not specific.
Nope. So happy to answer any questions on the report.
Councillor Matheson.
Well, enjoy Te Hunanui when they get there. Can I talk about parking for just a second? It's an attachment, page 41. We seem to have an increase in the number of people selling vehicles on the side of the road. And it's now sort of spread into Nayland Road, it was in Waimea Road. Where do we stand? It's illegal, I think, from memory, for people to sell their vehicles on the side of our roads.
Through the chair, that's correct. Yep.
So how do we, through you, Mr. Chair, how do we handle that?
As part of the parking officers' regular patrols, if they see any breach, they would follow that through. Yeah.
So, can you just, through you, Mr. Chair, can you just take me through the steps that they use? Do they give them a warning notice, or?
Through the chair, with most enforcement action, there is a first off sort of try to contact the owner and inform them that that is a breach, and then a follow-up to see that they've removed the vehicle.
Finally, through you, Mr. Chair, have you noticed increase in number of complaints from residents about cars for sale?
Through the chair, I couldn't answer that question. Okay. Sorry, I'll need to check with our complaints.
Thank you. Yeah, just following on in relation to the enforcement, there's been a lot of publicity over the radio lately that if you find people parked on the footpath, come to the council, pick up a notice and go and put it on that person's windscreen. I'm not happy with that. Our parking people, are they rostered to actually go around the streets and issue parking infringements for people parked on footpaths? And the reason I raise this and ask this question is that the disabled people are becoming more and more concerned that their route of walking along a footpath is obstructed by cars parked on it, and that's both themselves walking and also the blind impaired coming into finding cars there, and then there's no room for mobility scooters.
Through the chair, so again, the parking officers do have patrols that do go into the suburban streets, but obviously the patrols are infrequent as compared to the patrols in the CBD and Stoke centres. So currently we respond to complaints essentially.
On that one, first of all, so the message is to folk who are concerned about this, ring up council if something's getting on regularly parked on the footpath, get onto council and the staff will go out and check it out.
Through the chair, that's correct. Yep.
My other question is around the Food Act. Has that entailed a great deal of extra work, or what's the impact on staff of that one?
Through the chair, yes, that has impacted on staff. There is a lot of different systems to get in place. Council has been proactive though. We knew this change was coming and we have been proactively working with businesses to gear up towards that change early. But even so, there's about an extra half to a full FTE at this time. We believe it will settle down after probably the first, or in the first year there's a lot of background administrative type work to do, but in about 2 years on there will be a blip, but once we're over that blip then it should settle back.
Further question? Has this been particularly onerous for most people who are affected by it?
Through the chair, like all sort of new regulations and legislation, there is a varying degree of understanding. Council have committed a fair bit of resourcing to try and interpret what the regulations require in a much more user-friendly way to our customers. So, yeah, the Council is assisting a lot of our customers and businesses out there because there is difficulty in understanding what, you know, the major shift is.
So you say difficulty around the understanding. Once they understand, is it a costly business to comply?
Through the chair, costly and perhaps in terms of time, because it is a different approach. Instead of looking at equipment and things for a check, as that being clean, they need to say what their plan is to ensure that what they serve is safe to people. So it's a more sort of whole of life plan rather than just an equipment check. So once they put the time in to switch to that method will carry on for future years.
So it's the initial effort that is the most demanding bit.
Yeah, that's through the chair. That's correct. So yeah, the initial change, but that should see them right for the following subsequent years.
I've got a couple of questions. One in 6.2 said there's a 26% increase in resource consent applications. What sort of numbers are we talking about?
So for the last quarter, it was approximately 115 resource consents come in. So in the year prior, it would have been about 90, 95. Yeah.
Talking about 20.
About a 20.
And the flow through to building consents. I see comparison with last year we're down, but if I look at the last, say, 3-4 months, we're relatively tracking the same level as we were last year.
Yep, yes, Mr. Chair, certainly we are tracking the same levels as we were last year, and we're due to hit our projection, we feel, as well. However, we are in close connectivity with the consents and compliance, and we are aware of the numbers of resource consents increasing, and we are aware of our measures in place to ensure we can meet that need when it comes in.
And through you, Mr. Chair, just to bring to your attention that we're expecting a number of the special housing area consents to come through, which then will flow on through the building consent team in time.
Yeah, thanks. And the question, I'm not sure either of you will be able to answer this, but the report from the marine biosecurity, this might be Mr. Evans, who's not here at the moment. What level of infestation we're getting in terms of Stiella and Sabella down at the marina in the wharf area?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I can only broadly talk about this. The Sabella checks have been undertaken. Here we go, Mr. Evans is just in time, just in the nick of time. So the question, Mr. Evans, was around the marine biosecurity and what's been found about Sabella and Stiella, I think it is, the other one.
Good morning, everyone. Through the chair. So Stiella, I guess in the context of our current regional pest management strategy, would be a containment pest, even though it's not currently in there. So basically what that means is we would try and restrict its spread around the region, and there's a range of mechanisms in place to do that. The current survey which we've just had back has indicated that Stiola is reasonably widespread within our marina area and port area. I guess the size of the Stiola that's currently there is quite small, so we're making some pretty good progress around the control and removing the adult Stiola, so that's a good sign. And the survey has also indicated that the Sabella that we've been finding is the numbers are slowly decreasing, and that's a really good sign. And there's a potential to try and eliminate them from the marina altogether.
No questions? It's been moved, Councillor Davis. No debate. Okay, prepared to put the motion that report be the quarterly strategy and environment report for the quarter 1 January to 31st of March 2016 and its attachment be received. Moved Councillor Davies, seconded Councillor Ward. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Just record that Mrs. Payne has abstained. That concludes the business. Declare the meeting closed.